Ava's breath came in ragged bursts, her pulse thundering in her ears. The air smelled of burning metal and ozone. Around her, the colony dome had collapsed into chaos, fractured glass glittering like stars fallen to the dirt, the sound of distant sirens echoing through the smoke. Her hands trembled as she pressed against a half-buried panel, trying to pry it open. Beneath it, a child was crying, faint, desperate. "I've got you," she whispered, voice shaking. "Hold on, sweetheart, please," the ground rumbled. A tank-sized crawler, still smoldering from plasma fire, had rolled halfway onto the wreckage. Its weight made the metal groan. The child's cries turned to silence. "No, no, no." Ava's vision blurred. Behind her, alien soldiers, the Velen, stood in staggered ranks, their blue-scaled skin illuminated by the glow of their weapons. They watched the small Earthling woman frantically dig through wreckage, her messy hair stuck to her face, her thin arms straining uselessly. One of them, Lieutenant Rohr, tilted his head. "She's still trying to save that young one?" His voice held more curiosity than cruelty. "They never understand futility," his commander replied flatly. "Humans cling to the dead as if grief were strength." But Ava didn't hear them. Her ears were full of the child's fading breath. She braced herself against the crawler, a vehicle that weighed more than a dozen shuttles. The heat bit through her palms. She screamed, half in pain, half in defiance, and then something snapped, not in her, but around her. The air rippled, humming like a struck bell. The dust lifted in a slow swirl. Lieutenant Rohr's eyes widened. What's happening?" The crawler groaned, lifted an inch. Then another. Ava's muscles shuddered, but her grip didn't loosen. Every cell in her body screamed, but her mind had gone still, focused only on that one fragile heartbeat beneath the metal. "Please, don't die," she whispered, and with a sound like thunder cracking open the sky, she heaved. The crawler flipped onto its side, a 20-ton machine thrown aside like paper. The soldiers froze. Even the flames seemed to hesitate. Ava fell to her knees, gasping, her hands shaking violently. Beneath the wreck, she dragged the child free, alive, coughing, eyes wide. She pulled him close, sobbing with relief. "You're safe. You're okay." The Velen soldiers stared in stunned silence. Their scanners blinked red warnings. One muttered, "She just moved." "That? Impossible," said another. "Her species lacks augmentation." But Lieutenant Rohr's voice trembled. "Then how did she do it?" Ava looked up, eyes bright with tears and defiance, and for a heartbeat the smoke parted just enough to let sunlight strike her face. She didn't look like a soldier. She didn't look like a conqueror. She looked human. And in that fragile moment, every alien watching her felt something they didn't have a word for. Not fear, not pity, something deeper. The Velen commander touched his comm link. "Orath Prime," he said tightly. "We have a situation. The human has performed an impossible act. Gravity disruption detected. Immediate analysis required." Static crackled, then a cold voice replied from orbit. "Contain the subject. Do not let it reach the core field. Contain." Ava didn't understand their words, but when the air around her shimmered and the ground began to quake, she knew what danger felt like. She clutched the child tighter and looked at the massive shadows rising through the dust. Velen mechs, approaching fast. Her voice shook as she whispered to herself, "I just wanted to help." But the universe had heard her differently. In that single act of mercy, she had done something no species, not even the Velen, had ever achieved. She had awakened a force buried deep beneath the colony world. A hum began under her feet, soft but growing. The dust vibrated, and high above in the orbiting dreadnought, alien officers stared at their screens as readings went off the charts. One of them whispered in disbelief, "The human." "She's changing the field." And for the first time in their history, the Velen Empire, masters of conquest, destroyers of worlds, felt the cold touch of uncertainty, because a so-called cute Earthling had just carried a tank, and the laws of their universe were suddenly negotiable. Cold blue light washed across the bridge of the Velen dreadnought Orath Prime. Every console flickered with data that refused to make sense. Power readings spiked beyond calibration. Gravitational waves pulsed in chaotic rhythm, and all of it, every impossible signature, pointed to a single origin, a small human female on the surface. Commander Ceylon stood in silence before the main viewport. His 4 reflective eyes locked on the burning colony below. Smoke coiled like ink through the atmosphere. "Play it again," he ordered. The holofeed replayed. Slow motion, crystal clear. The image of Ava filled the bridge, the human, eyes fierce through ash and tears pressing her hands against the overturned crawler. And then the lift, the impossible lift. The entire ship seemed to hold its breath as the machine rose. Ceylon's mandibles twitched. "Pause there." He studied the hologram, zooming in on the faint golden light that seemed to ripple beneath her skin. "Is that an exofield?" "No, Commander," said Chief Analyst Tyrion. "We detected no mechanical support, no energy armor, nothing artificial. The energy came from inside her." Ceylon's voice dropped low. "Inside?" "Yes, sir." We mapped the spectrum. The field registered harmonic frequencies across the gravitational band, frequencies identical to those of a pulse core. A tense silence spread through the command deck. Officers exchanged glances. Someone whispered, "But the core is sealed beneath the crust. Nothing living should resonate with it." Ceylon's claws curled against the metal rail. "Unless the core has chosen to resonate." He turned back to the viewport. On the planet below, the human stood amid the rubble, clutching the small child she had saved. The scanners showed her life signs flickering erratically, yet the gravitational readings around her were expanding like ripples in a pond. "She's leaking gravitational energy," said Tyrion, panic rising. "If this continues, the pulse will activate itself." "Activate?" Ceylon snapped. "You mean detonate?" "Either outcome is possible," Tyrion whispered. For the first time in a century, the bridge of a Valen warship filled with fear. The Valen Empire was built on absolute order. They ruled through control, through measured technology and perfect obedience to physics. But here, in the wreckage of a human colony, a fragile creature of flesh and water had defied every known law. She carried a tank. One officer muttered in disbelief, "And she didn't even mean to." Ceylon raised a hand to quiet the murmurs. His voice was sharp and cold. "Send a containment team, now, before this anomaly spreads." The order rippled through the ship like lightning. Drones deployed, shuttles ignited, scanners swept the atmosphere. Yet even as the fleets mobilized, a strange, pulsing sound began to echo faintly through the comms. A low, rhythmic vibration, almost like a heartbeat. "Commander," Tyrion said, his voice cracking. "The pulse core's resonance is increasing. It's responding to her emotions." Ceylon frowned. "Her emotions?" "She's afraid." "The readings surge when her fear rises." Ceylon turned back to the image of the human on the ground, kneeling beside the child, clutching him tight as alien drones began to descend. Her lips moved, a whisper, unheard across the void, but clear on the visual feed. "Please don't hurt us," and with that plea, every sensor in orbit spiked to maximum. A wave of invisible energy burst from her location, sweeping across the continent. Velen shuttles were thrown off course, their engines flickering. Several ships lost altitude entirely. "Shields to full," Ceylon shouted. The deck lights dimmed as power rerouted to defenses. The dreadnought trembled, groaning under the strain. When the surge finally subsided, half their systems were fried. Silence fell again. Stunned, heavy silence. Tyrion's voice was barely a whisper. "She emitted enough gravitational force to repel our fleet." Ceylon's claws clicked against the rail. "A human civilian," he said slowly, "just repelled the most advanced warship in the Empire, using nothing but fear." He exhaled, mandibles tightening. "Update the Council," he said. "Effective immediately, we are classifying humans as level alpha anomalies. They are not prey. They are not inferior. They are unpredictable, and that makes them dangerous." His gaze stayed fixed on the burning colony. The human woman was still down there, unaware that the galaxy had just redefined her species. Ceylon's tone darkened. "The universe has underestimated Earth for the last time." Behind him, the Valen insignia flickered, a symbol of conquest trembling on the edge of irrelevance. Because today, a cute little Earthling had bent gravity itself out of compassion, and the universe didn't have a category for that. The sky was bleeding orange when Ava felt the ground tremble again. But this time, it wasn't from artillery. It was deeper, older, like the heartbeat of something enormous stirring beneath the crust. She held the rescued child close as the vibrations grew stronger. Dust rose around them in spirals, whispering across the ruins. The alien soldiers who had survived the shockwave were regrouping, their weapons trembling in their claws. "What are they doing?" she whispered to herself, seeing their scanners glow with blue lines aimed directly at her. Then, through the ringing in her ears, she heard it. A voice. Soft, calm, vast in whispering, not through sound, but through her thoughts. "You reached into pain, not power, and that is why you were heard," Ava gasped. Who's speaking?" "The one beneath your feet," the voice replied, smooth as gravity and old as sorrow. "You woke me, little one of carbon. You bent the rules not for dominance, but to save." Her pulse raced. "What? Are you?" "I am the pulse." The memory of a civilization that tried to master gravity, and in doing so sank beneath it. We waited. For one who would not use us as weapon but as mercy. Ava looked around frantically. The Velen soldiers were shouting commands, forming a perimeter. She couldn't understand their words, but their tone was clear. Fear. She pressed her hand against the quaking ground. It felt warm, almost alive. "Why me?" "Because your heart lifted what your strength could not. Because you chose compassion when logic said surrender." The air shimmered golden again. Lines of faint light began to appear along the broken soil, like veins pulsing beneath the planet's skin. The ground cracked open slightly, revealing a dim glow from below, something vast awakening. From orbit, Commander Silan watched the seismic data scroll across his screen. "By the core," he murmured. "She's in resonance alignment. That's not supposed to be possible." His analyst, Turin, looked terrified. "Sir, the pulse core is fully active. If it awakens completely, it could destabilize the planet's gravity well." Silan's voice hardened. "Evacuate the surface units immediately. Do not engage the human again. We can't risk a collapse event." "But sir," Turin stammered. "She might control it." Silan's gaze lingered on the glowing fissures spreading across the colony ruins. "No one controls the pulse," he said quietly. "It consumes everything that tries." Yet as he spoke, the holofeed flickered, showing Ava standing in the center of a swirling golden storm, her hair rising in the static wind, her eyes reflecting the light of something immense and ancient. The Velen soldiers nearby fell to their knees, overwhelmed by a weight they couldn't describe. Not pressure, not gravity, but awe. The core's voice resonated in their minds too, faint and trembling. "You who call yourselves conquerors, you have forgotten creation." Ava turned her head upward, her voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" "To remember what power was meant for," the pulse answered. "To protect life, not cage it." The ground erupted in a column of radiant energy. Shards of rock and dust suspended midair, frozen as if time itself hesitated. Ava shielded the child in her arms, the light wrapping around them like liquid fire. Silan's crew scrambled to interpret the readings. "Commander, the energy flux just inverted," shouted Turin. "It's not collapsing, it's stabilizing. She's redirecting the core's pulse output." "Redirecting? To what purpose?" Silan demanded. Turin's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "She's reinforcing the colony's magnetic field. She's protecting the survivors." The bridge went utterly silent. Silan leaned closer to the image of the human, this fragile creature who had turned a planet-killer weapon into a shield. He whispered almost to himself, "How is she doing this without technology?" "She's doing it with intent," Turin said softly. "With empathy." Outside, the light began to fade, leaving only quiet, the strange, heavy kind of quiet that follows miracles. Ava fell to her knees, exhausted but breathing, the child still safe in her arms. The whisper in her mind softened to a hum. "The bond is made. The core sleeps again. But through you, its will lives." Ava swallowed hard. "What does that mean?" "It means," the pulse replied gently, "they will come for you now." Her eyes lifted toward the heavens where faint lights glimmered, Velen ships regrouping in the upper atmosphere. And far above, Commander Ceylon stared down at the data one last time, the meaning dawning slowly. The Corps had chosen a human. And in that moment, the Velen Empire realized they weren't studying a new weapon. They were witnessing a new kind of being, not born from conquest, but from compassion strong enough to move the world itself. The Velen High Council chamber was a cathedral of shadows and steel, suspended in orbit above the fractured colony world. Holographic streams of data glowed between towering crystalline pillars. Every whisper echoed like thunder. Commander Ceylon stood at the center, his uniform scorched, his voice steady. Before him shimmered 8 translucent figures, the elders of the Empire, ancient and severe, their eyes reflecting centuries of dominance. "Repeat your statement," hissed Elder Tehran, his voice sharp as glass. "You claim the Pulse Corps has bonded with a human?" "Yes," Ceylon answered. Her biological resonance aligned perfectly with the Corps' quantum field. She stabilized. The gravitational collapse with no technology, no psionic implants, and no intent to destroy. The elders exchanged murmurs of disbelief. "That's impossible," one spat. "The Corps reject all organic interference." Except this one did not. The chamber pulsed with tension. Elder Vara leaned forward, her tone dripping disdain. "Humans are primitive. They lack the neural lattice necessary for core interaction." "You are suggesting—" "I am reporting," Ceylon interrupted, his composure cracking. "I saw it myself." She turned a planet-killer weapon into a protective barrier. A silence fell that felt heavier than gravity itself. Finally, Elder Vara spoke, voice low. "If what you say is true, then the entire premise of Velen superiority collapses." Ceylon's mandibles tightened. Then perhaps it's time it did. The chamber erupted in chaos. Voices overlapping, arguments, denials, threats. Words like heresy, mutation, and containment filled the air. But Ceylon didn't move. His 4 eyes stared into the glowing map above them. The human colony now bathed in a halo of golden energy. They had thought humanity was weak, predictable, simple, but something about them, their defiance and suffering, their refusal to give up even when logic demanded surrender, had connected with the pulse, a machine older than their empire. It hadn't chosen a conqueror, it had chosen compassion. Far below on the planet's surface, Ava stood in the quiet after the storm. The ground beneath her feet was no longer trembling, it was breathing. The faint hum of the pulse lingered in the air, like a heartbeat she could feel in her chest. The survivors had begun to emerge from the ruins. Humans, Velen deserters, children covered in ash. They looked at her differently now, not as a soldier or a savior, but as something unexplainable. One Velen soldier approached cautiously. His armor was cracked, his weapon discarded. He bowed his head slightly. "Human, are you the Corps' voice?" Ava blinked in confusion. "No, I'm just me." But even as she said it, the ground beneath her shimmered faintly, responding to her heartbeat. She could feel the pulse, not speaking but listening. "Then why do you glow when you breathe?" the soldier whispered. Ava looked at her hands, faint golden veins still pulsing softly under her skin. She didn't have an answer. Above, the planet. Ceylon stood alone at the observation deck, watching the glow spread over the colony like dawn. He couldn't help but feel a strange sense of peace. For all his years of war, he had never seen power used this way. To heal, to shield, to unify instead of divide. Tyrion approached, data pad in hand. "Commander, the readings are stabilizing. The pulse core has gone dormant again, but it's tethered to her vitals now." Ceylon exhaled slowly. "Then she's the key. Or the end," Tyrion murmured. "If the pulse dies with her." Ceylon's gaze lingered on the distant shimmer. "Then we protect her." Tyrion froze. "Protect? Commander, she's a threat to the Empire." Ceylon turned sharply. "No, she's a mirror. The threat isn't her. It's what we refuse to see." Gu. The Velen capital, the Council's decision came swiftly. Eradicate the anomaly. A fleet was dispatched, 5 warships armed with planetary disintegration cannons. But the moment they entered the human colony's orbit, their systems failed. Shields flickered, engines sputtered. The fleet's formation broke apart as their sensors filled with golden static. Then one by one their ships were gently pushed away, not destroyed, not attacked, just removed. Their navigators screamed that it wasn't gravity doing it. It was will. From the surface, Ava stood with her hands raised slightly, not knowing how she was doing it, only that she could feel the ships like echoes in her pulse. She didn't want to hurt them. She just wanted them to leave, and so they did. The sky cleared. The silence that followed was absolute. Ceylon's fleet watched from a distance, sensors recording everything. She repelled 5 warships, Turin whispered, his voice thin with awe, without weapons, without hatred. Ceylon nodded slowly. Yes, she's teaching us something our entire empire forgot. He turned toward the dark horizon, where the stars glimmered faintly beyond the clouds. Recalibrate our doctrine, he ordered softly. Effective immediately, the Velen no longer classify humans as inferiors. Turin hesitated. Then what are they? Ceylon's gaze returned to the image of the human woman standing alone beneath the golden sky, hair whipping in the wind, eyes filled with quiet strength. He spoke the word carefully, reverently. Elders. And with that, the Velen Empire, built on the cold foundation of dominance, began to tremble from within, because one small Earthling had not only carried a tank, she had carried the weight of enlightenment. The world had gone still. For the first time in years, there were no alarms, no plasma sirens, no screams swallowed by the smoke of battle, just the whisper of wind through the fractured remains of a colony, and the quiet hum of a strange golden peace. Ava sat at the edge of what used to be a defense tower. Half of it now leaned toward the horizon like a broken monument. Below her, engineers, both human and Velen, worked side by side, patching together shelters, repairing water lines, burying the fallen. She watched them silently, her eyes tired but calm. The faint glow under her skin had dimmed since that day, but she could still feel the pulse, like the rhythm of a second heartbeat beneath her own. Footsteps approached behind her, slow, heavy, deliberate. She turned slightly. Commander Ceylon stood there, no longer in his ornate armor. He wore a simple cloak, his weapons removed. The wind caught its edges as he stopped a few steps away, his 4 eyes reflecting the pale sunlight. "You terrify my kind," he said quietly. Ava smiled faintly. "I scare myself sometimes." Ceylon's mandibles twitched in what might have been the Velen version of a sigh. "You changed everything, Earthling. The Council has fallen into panic. Old laws are unraveling. Some demand retaliation, others surrender. And you?" Ava asked softly. "I don't know," he admitted. "I've fought wars all my life, conquered worlds, silenced resistance. I thought order was strength." He glanced down at the survivors below. "Now I see. Perhaps endurance is." Ava looked at him, her voice gentle but firm. "You can't rule a galaxy with fear forever. Sooner or later fear turns inward." Ceylon's gaze hardened, then softened again. "And what do you intend to do with what you've become?" She hesitated. The question had haunted her every night since the pulse awoke. "I don't know if it's me that changed," she murmured. "Maybe the pulse didn't give me power. Maybe it just reminded me that we already had it, all of us." The alien tilted his head. "Power through compassion?" Ava nodded slowly. "Through connection." Ceylon studied her. This small creature from a fragile planet who had rewritten the rules of their universe by choosing kindness over domination. She was no god, no warrior, just a person who refused to stop caring, and somehow that was enough to shake an empire. As the sun set, a quiet ceremony began. Humans and Velen gathered together among the ruins. No banners, no anthem, just silence and the slow lighting of lanterns. For every soul lost, one flame floated upward. When the first lantern rose, the golden light from Ava's chest responded faintly, pulsing once, almost like it was saluting them. The survivors watched, whispering prayers in languages that had never been spoken in the same breath before. A small child tugged on Ava's sleeve. The same one she had saved. His voice was soft. "Miss Ava, are you an angel?" She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "No, sweetheart. Just someone who didn't give up." The boy thought for a moment, then said, "Then maybe angels are just people who keep trying." Her eyes glistened. Maybe they are. Later that night, when the camp had quieted and the stars returned to their rightful place, Ceylon stood again at the edge of the rebuilt dome, watching the heavens. Ava joined him, their silence comfortable. "You could have destroyed us," he said finally. "Why didn't you?" She looked up at the constellations. "Because I saw what fear does. And because if I used that power for revenge, I'd become the very thing I hated." Ceylon was quiet for a long time before answering. "That restraint is not weakness. It's evolution." Ava gave a tired smile. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just humanity's last defense, and that no matter how much we suffer, we still want to make things better." Ceylon turned his gaze to her. "That is why the pulse chose you." Ava shook her head. "No, it didn't choose me. It chose us." The night deepened, and from high above the planet glowed faintly golden in the darkness, a beacon among dead stars. Across the galaxy, sensors from countless civilizations picked up the energy signature. Many dismissed it. Others watched in silence. But among the Velen, a shift had begun, quiet but unstoppable. They began to question their purpose, their pride, their history of conquest. And it all began with the story of a small human who carried a tank not out of rage, but love. Ava had shown them that strength wasn't in the crushing of enemies, but in the courage to protect even those who once called you inferior. She stood there under the alien sky, feeling the pulse of the world beneath her and the ache of hope in her heart. The war was over. But the lesson had just begun. Morning broke not with the sound of battle, but with something stranger, the low melodic hum of alien transmitters tuned to human frequencies. For the first time in galactic history, the Velen requested talks, not surrender terms, but peace. Ava stood inside the old command dome, now refitted with panels of both human steel and Velen crystal. The hybrid construction shimmered like dawn caught in metal. She wasn't wearing armor. She didn't need to. Her hand rested lightly on the table, her reflection faint in the polished surface. Across from her stood Ceylon and 4 Velen counselors, their wings folded in solemn restraint. Holographic projections of Earth's leaders hovered nearby, faces half lit by the soft blue light of communication arrays. The air was heavy with silence, the kind that came before something new. One of the counselors, old and scarred, broke the stillness. "Earthling Ava Solis," he began, his voice deep, quivering with restrained emotion. "We have no precedent for what you did. You shattered every measure of strength we've known. No world should have survived what we unleashed." Ava didn't move. "We didn't survive because of power," she said. "We survived because we refused to stop helping each other, even when everything broke." Another Velen spoke sharply. "You turned the very weapon of the gods against us. The pulse was not meant for mortals." Ava met his gaze calmly. "Then maybe you shouldn't have forgotten that mortals feel." Her voice carried through the chamber, steady, almost tender, but unshakably firm. "You saw weakness in laughter and compassion in tears, but that's where humanity's strength hides, not in claws or ships. In the will to believe when every reason says stop." The word struck deep. Even the translators paused as if they hesitated to reduce what she said into mere sound. Ceylon finally spoke, his tone quieter than before. "You're kind, I'll be so small, so fragile. Yet you carry defiance in your bones." "Why?" Ava smiled faintly. "Because we've always been underestimated. On Earth, the storms are harsh, the cold bites, the heat burns, but we kept climbing. You look at us and see fragility, but you forget that we learned strength from pain." A hush fell again. One of the Velen counselors, younger and curious, leaned forward. "Then tell us, human, what will you do now? You hold the pulse. You could command the stars." Ava took a slow breath. "I don't want to command them. I want to understand them." Her words echoed in the crystalline dome, soft and reverent. Outside, the remnants of war were being transformed. Human engineers taught Velen architects how to build with gravity fields and balance pressure through atmosphere veins. Velen healers taught humans how to regenerate skin using starlight bacteria. Children from both species ran together across fields of silver moss, chasing light drones that glowed like tiny suns. The galaxy had not found peace overnight, but something far rarer: curiosity without fear. Later that evening, Ava stood before a live transmission, the first joint broadcast from Earth and the Velen Empire. Billions across both worlds tuned in. She looked into the lens, not as a soldier, not as a symbol, but as a human being. Many thought this war was the end, she began. But maybe it was the mirror we needed to finally see ourselves clearly. The Velen feared humans because we don't break the way they expect. We keep standing, even when we shouldn't. She paused, letting her next words land slowly like falling stars. Strength isn't about who can destroy faster. It's about who keeps building after everything's destroyed. Across the broadcast network, silence fell. Then from hundreds of planets, responses poured in, not with shouts, but with light. Lanterns, beacons, transmissions pulsing through the void. Silan stepped beside her, speaking softly into the feed. To all who listen, the Velen no longer hunt the stars. We will learn from the ones we once called cute. The word cute rippled through the networks. It had been the Valen's mocking term for humans, fragile, emotional, harmless. But now it was being redefined across the galaxy. Ava smiled at the thought. Maybe that's what makes us dangerous, she whispered, half to herself. We're the kind that smiles before lifting a tank. The room filled with quiet laughter. Not mockery, but awe. And when the broadcast ended, Silan turned to her. You realize they'll remember this day forever. I hope so, she said. Because next time someone calls humanity small, I want them to remember what small really means. Silan's eyes glimmered. Infinite pressure. Infinite strength, she nodded. Exactly. That night, as she walked alone beneath a sky shared by two worlds, Ava felt the pulse stir once more beneath her skin, not in warning but in peace. The war had ended. The fear had begun to fade, but in the vast silence between stars, the universe was whispering a single truth to itself. Humanity had finally spoken back, and the cosmos was listening. Years passed. The galaxy healed, but it never forgot. Across the spiral arms of 1,000 worlds, songs were whispered, stories retold of the tiny blue planet whose people once stood against gods. Children of alien races drew pictures of a human woman with light under her skin, holding something impossibly heavy with a calm smile. They called her Ava of the Pulse, but to the humans who lived beside her, she was still just Ava Solis, the engineer who laughed too much, carried tools twice her size, and believed in fixing things no one thought could be fixed. It was dawn on the rebuilt colony of Kareth, Prime. The air shimmered faintly with the pale glow of newly growing flora, the hybrid of human bioengineering and Velen, crystal seed. Ava walked through the fields with Silan beside her. The once proud commander now wore a simple explorer's jacket, the insignia of empire replaced by the symbol of unity, a circle with a heartbeat line running through it. He glanced at her with a faint smirk. You're quiet today, she smiled slightly. Just thinking how strange it is. A galaxy full of predators, and yet they call us cute. Silan gave a dry laugh. That word has reshaped our entire language. Among the Velen, it now means something deceptively unstoppable. Good, Ava said softly. Then we finally taught them something important. They reached the observation cliff where an enormous structure rose from the valley, the Hall of Echoes. It wasn't a fortress nor a temple. It was a memory archive, built together by human and Velen hands to preserve every story of the war and what came after. Thousands of names shimmered across the crystal walls, both species mixed together equal in remembrance. Ava pressed her palm against the glass. The pulse responded faintly, sending a wave of golden light through the hall, like the memories themselves were breathing. Silan watched her quietly. You never told me how you carried that tank. Ava tilted her head. Would you believe me if I said I didn't? He frowned. You mean? She smiled. The pulse wasn't just me. It was everyone. All the voices, all the will to protect, all the people who refused to die afraid. I was just the one who touched it first. The silence that followed was sacred. The wind passed softly through the valley, carrying the scent of metal and life. That evening, a council gathered in the hall, not of leaders, but of explorers, scientists, and dreamers. They came from Earth, Velen Prime, and a dozen newly allied worlds. The first Galactic Accord was about to be signed, not a treaty of dominance, but of coexistence. Ava stood at the center, her voice calm, her presence humble. "We once measured strength by what we could destroy," she said. "Now let's measure it by what we can build." The crowd murmured in agreement. Even the air seemed to still as her next words echoed. "When the pulse awoke, it showed me something I'll never forget. Not visions of power, but of hands. Millions of them reaching through fear, through pain, through darkness, all trying to hold on to something good. That's humanity. That's what we bring to the stars." Silan stepped forward beside her. "And that," he said, his voice deep and clear, "is what saved the Valen." The crowd rose, humans and aliens alike, their applause a trembling wave that felt less like noise and more like a heartbeat. Later that night, when the ceremony ended and the stars returned to their quiet vigil, Ava stood alone on the balcony. Her reflection shimmered in the glass, older now, calmer, but still burning with that quiet, defiant light. Silan joined her again, carrying 2 small cups of luminescent tea. "You've given them hope," he said. She took a sip, smiling faintly. "Hope's the only thing we never ran out of." He looked at her, the human who once made entire fleets retreat, and said softly, "You've changed the meaning of power forever." She turned to him, her eyes distant but warm. "Then let's keep it that way." Far above them, satellites from hundreds of species pulsed in rhythm, transmitting a single unified signal through the void. A symbol, not of war but of kinship. In the deepest parts of the universe, where ancient empires still whispered in the dark, sensors flickered with that human frequency. One archivist on a distant world asked, "Who are these Earthlings?" The answer came like a legend passed through time. "They are small. They are kind. They are terrifying." As dawn rose again over the valley, Ava looked toward the horizon. The same golden light that once meant fire and fear now painting the sky with promise. The war was a memory. The galaxy had changed, and humanity, the once cute species of dreamers and fools, had become something new, not conquerors, not gods, just builders. Builders of peace, of hope, of meaning, and in the heart of it all, one small Earthling who once carried a tank and reminded the stars that even the smallest hands can lift the heaviest burdens when they do it for love. The galaxy would never again underestimate humanity. Because now, when they spoke of Earth, they spoke with reverence. When a so-called cute Earthling carried a tank, the universe recalibrated its definition of impossible.